Human curiosity is a double-edged sword, a relentless drive that has pulled us from the darkness of caves to the brilliance of the stars. Yet, nestled within this pursuit lies a silent, predatory force known as hubris. It is the intoxicating belief that nature can be shackled, that the laws of the universe are merely suggestions to be rewritten by the hand of man. For every leap of progress that illuminates our world, a long, dark shadow is cast. We often forget that genius, when decoupled from empathy, carries a devastating price. These 10 stories are not just chronicles of scientific inquiry. They are the moments where that shadow grew long enough to swallow the creators themselves, leaving behind a legacy of bone and cold regret. This is the heavy cost of the forbidden fruit of knowledge, where the spark of ambition ignites a fire that cannot be contained. Consider the case of Louis Slotin in the tense post-war silence of 1946. At Los Alamos, the air was still heavy with the ghosts of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Slotin was a physicist of remarkable brilliance, tasked with the delicate procedure of tickling the dragon's tail. He was pushing the physical boundaries of a 14-pound sphere of plutonium known ominously as the demon core. To maintain its stability and prevent a criticality accident, he used a simple flathead screwdriver to keep 2 half shells of beryllium apart by a mere fraction of an inch. It was a dance with death performed with a household tool, defying every safety protocol. On a fateful May afternoon, the screwdriver slipped. In a fraction of a second, the room was bathed in a haunting, ethereal blue light, the signature of a massive burst of ionizing radiation. Slotin didn't scream. He acted with instinctive heroism. He jerked the shells apart, stopping the reaction and saving his 7 colleagues from certain death, but the damage to his own body was absolute. A wave of heat hit him, and a sour taste of metal filled his mouth. Looking at his friend, he whispered a chilling realization. He was a dead man walking. He succumbed to radiation sickness 9 days later, his organs melted, a sacrificial lamb for nuclear security. While Slotin's tragedy was physical, other experiments sought to dismantle the very architecture of the human soul. In 1971, Philip Zimbardo transformed a basement at Stanford University into a simulated prison. He wanted to understand the nature of evil, whether it was an inherent trait or a product of systems. He took 24 good young men, college students with no history of violence, and divided them into guards and prisoners. The descent into chaos was terrifyingly swift. Within hours, the guards, empowered by khaki uniforms and mirrored sunglasses, began to exercise a sadistic brand of psychological warfare. They forced prisoners to perform degrading tasks and stripped them of their basic dignity. The prisoners, stripped of their names and given only numbers, began to internalize their roles, experiencing genuine mental breakdowns. The line between reality and roleplay dissolved into a nightmare of harassment and mental collapse. The experiment, intended to last 2 weeks, had to be aborted after only 6 days because the participants had become unrecognizable even to themselves. Zimbardo found his answer. Identity is a fragile mask, easily discarded when power demands a monster. Yet, perhaps the most chilling betrayals occur when the very institutions designed to protect us turn their backs on humanity. In the rural south of Alabama, the Tuskegee syphilis study stands as a monument to clinical coldness and systemic betrayal. For 40 years, government doctors monitored hundreds of impoverished black men who believed they were receiving treatment for bad blood. In reality, they were being watched as their bodies slowly withered from untreated syphilis, even when a cure was found. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. These men were treated not as patients, but as biological data points for a study on how the disease ravages the human frame until death. It was a realization that the most dangerous experiments often hide in plain sight under the banner of national health. The betrayal of the Tuskegee patients was merely a prelude to a deeper, more systematic infiltration of the human psyche. As the Cold War froze the world in a grip of paranoia, the pursuit of the ultimate weapon shifted from the physical to the psychological. The CIA initiated Project MKUltra, a clandestine program that treated the American public as an unwitting laboratory. Faceless subjects, ordinary citizens, mental patients, and prisoners were subjected to extreme sensory deprivation and the administration of potent hallucinogens like LSD. The goal was to shatter the core of the human personality, hoping to rebuild it into a programmable tool for intelligence. Instead of creating super spies, the experiment left a trail of broken minds and permanent mental scarring. The subjects were often lured into safe houses or clinics under the guise of therapy, only to find themselves trapped in a labyrinth of induced psychosis. They were treated as raw material, stripped of their names and histories, and subjected to repeated shocks that intended to erase the concept of self. For thousands, the walls of reality were permanently thinned, replaced by an internal static that patriotism could not justify. While the West experimented with the mind, the Soviet Union sought to conquer the physical limits of life and death. Vladimir Demikov, a pioneer of organ transplantation, pushed his surgical genius into the realm of the grotesque. In the cold laboratories of the Soviet state, he created creatures that looked as if they had been birthed from a fever dream, two-headed dogs. By grafting the upper body of a puppy onto the neck of a larger German shepherd, he demonstrated that a single circulatory system could sustain two consciousnesses. The visual of the smaller head attempting to lap milk, while the larger dog looked on in agony, remains a symbol of scientific detachment. The larger dog's eyes often reflected a quiet, profound terror as it shared its pulse with a severed companion. Demikov's motivation was a desperate search for immortality, a belief that any biological part could be replaced. Yet, the emotional impact of his work was a moral vacuum, where the suffering of these creatures was ignored for the sake of progress. This descent into moral darkness reached its absolute nadir in the secret facilities of Unit 731. In the occupied territories of China, Imperial Japanese researchers engaged in the darkest chapter of biological warfare. Human beings, referred to callously as Maruta, were subjected to horrors that defy the capacity of imagination. They were infected with plague to test the efficiency of biological weapons. Scientists in pristine white coats performed vivisections without anesthesia, watching with clinical interest as life drained from their subjects' eyes. The screams were treated as data points, the suffering as a variable to be measured. The chilling aspect of this abyss was the aftermath. When the war ended, many of those responsible were never punished. Instead, they were granted immunity in exchange for the lethal data they had harvested, trading human dignity for cold clinical knowledge. As the 1960s dawned, the scale of these experiments expanded from the laboratory to the heavens themselves. In an era of unbridled competition, the United States launched Starfish Prime, detonating a nuclear warhead in the magnetosphere. They wanted to test the limits of Earth's defenses, effectively breaking the sky to see how it would react. The suspense was followed by an artificial aurora that turned the Pacific sky a deep bruised red. Thousands of miles away, electronics died, and streetlights flickered out as the electromagnetic pulse rippled through the atmosphere. Scientists realized too late that the disturbed radiation belts would persist for years, threatening the space race they were so desperate to win. It was a moment of profound realization. The world was not a sandbox for curiosity, but a delicate clockwork mechanism. If we can break the sky for data, what happens when we try to recreate the Earth? If we could not survive in a world we broke, could we build a new one from scratch? This was the question behind Biosphere 2, a fragile glass cathedral in the Arizona desert. In 1991, 8 individuals, known as the Biospherians, were sealed inside this miniature Earth, complete with a rainforest, a desert, and a small ocean. Their goal was a blueprint for life on Mars. However, nature proved an unruly tenant. Within months, oxygen levels plummeted, leaving the crew gasping for air. The morning glory vines, intended for decoration, became suffocating monsters that choked out food crops. While most animals died, ants and cockroaches thrived. The most devastating failure was human. The crew split into warring factions, their unity shattered by hunger and isolation. The experiment proved a humbling truth. We are far from understanding the staggering complexity of the world we inhabit, and our attempts to replicate it are often nothing more than fragile imitations. While some looked to the stars, others turned their gaze toward the secrets buried beneath our feet. In the bleak, desolate Kola Peninsula, Soviet scientists began a journey to the center of the Earth. The Kola Superdeep borehole was an attempt to pierce the planetary crust and see what lay in the dark heart of the world. For decades, they drilled deeper than any human had ever gone, eventually reaching over 12 kilometers. But the Earth fought back. At those depths, temperatures spiked to 180 degrees Celsius, melting their expensive equipment. Rumors began to circulate of the sounds of hell, ghostly screams captured by microphones lowered into the abyss. Whether these were geological groans or something more sinister, the project was abandoned. The visual of the hole remains a rusted cap in the ground, a silent testament that some doors are closed for a reason. Humanity's curiosity often outpaces its wisdom, reminding us that the Earth has limits we ignore at our peril. This trajectory of ambition reached its modern climax with the Large Hadron Collider. Nestled beneath the border of France and Switzerland, this 17-mile ring of magnets represents the pinnacle of our quest for the origin of everything. The goal was finding the infamous God particle and unlocking the secrets of the Big Bang. Yet, as the first collision approached, global anxiety took hold. Critics whispered of doomsday scenarios, fearing that smashing particles at nearly the speed of light would create a microscopic black hole that would swallow the Earth. The world watched, suspended in terror, waiting for an apocalypse born from the very machines meant to save us. Though the world did not end, the fear reflected our deepening unease with our own power. We had reached a point where our thirst for knowledge made us gamble with the existence of the planet itself. Looking back at these 10 journeys into the unknown, a haunting pattern emerges. These were not just failures of engineering, they were profound failures of empathy. From the flash of the Demon Core to the psychic scars of MKUltra and the dehumanization of the Maruta, the common thread is the sacrifice of the living for the sake of the abstract. The driven scientist, blinded by discovery, often fails to see the shadows they cast. We are the inheritors of these ghosts, students of a history written in radiation and blood. The redemption for these acts lies in carrying their lessons forward. We must ensure that our pursuit of knowledge never outstrips our commitment to the human spirit. As we stand on the precipice of new frontiers like artificial intelligence, the most dangerous experiment is the one we are living, the test of whether humanity can survive its own brilliance. The haunting echoes of the departed remind us that while science can tell us how to touch the stars, only our shared collective humanity can tell us if we should.